Okay, so today we're going to take a look at a concept called structuralism. I'm not sure how much you've studied this in the past, but I guarantee you it has affected your life and our culture more than you might realize. It was developed in the early 1900s, and it's basically an approach to understanding life. And the way it does this is by looking at the underlying systems or the underlying structures. Hence the term structuralism. So in this video, I'm going to start out by looking at the historical notions that it overturned. And then we'll look at its early influencers, what exactly it entails, and then we'll get into how the implications of structuralism and how it's affecting your life and our culture. So get ready for this. It's going to be intense. Okay, so we're going to begin by defining a few terms that structuralism is going to throw out the window. And this has all been communicated very elegantly by Dr. Louis Marco's lectures on structuralism, so I just wanted to give him credit for his insights on this. All right, so I have these two terms up here, ontology and epistemology. Ontology is the study of being, a way of uncovering something's eternal essence. Epistemology is the study of knowing and the notion of belief and how we can access rational knowledge. And I wanted to define these terms because historically these have been of great concern to philosophers. But as we're going to see, structuralism is going to break from this in order to get to a new source of meaning. Now, how does it do that? Let's get back to some of the roots of philosophy. Remember this guy? I told you we can't get away. So if you remember, Plato believed in the forms and that the ultimate idea, or the essence of everything, existed in the heavens. Plato believed that ideas were real things and they had real essences. They're not shadowy or insubstantial or man-made. They're real truths, capital T truths. And those forms are really the origins of then everything in our world. So here's Plato's system with the true essence and reality existing in this heavenly realm. Now, structuralism is going to turn that on its head. It's going to say, no. There's not some kind of spiritual essence or reality that's informing all of our material experience. Any kind of metaphysical meaning that we think we are experiencing is simply arising out of or is a product of material system and structure. So if you want a perfect example of this, just take a look at the proto-structuralist Karl Marx. You have all heard of this guy. So Marx argued that religion, philosophy, art, these are not pure vehicles of higher truths, but claims that they are products of an underlying economic structure. So for Marx, meaning doesn't start up there and then proceed downward. Meaning begins in our world, the physical, material, and all these social, economic forces, and then it makes its way upward. So things like democracy, religion, for Marx, all of those things are just products of socio-economic forces. And so you can see this is how Marx breaks from ontology. Now, what about epistemology? So epistemology is the study of knowing. And so the idea of the subjective mind, pure consciousness. If you recall Descartes' I think, therefore I am. And historically, the center of all truth was our consciousness, our ego, our way of knowing. Well, structuralism overturns this, and they will say that our identity and our consciousness is really not the origin of anything. These are really just the results of something that is more physical and material. I'm going to throw up another proto-structuralist that you probably recognize. So this is Sigmund Freud, and he was hugely influential and basically tried to overturn our understanding of epistemology or our understanding of how we know. And so Freud tried to remove the self as the center or origin of meaning by showing that it's not the clear, meaningful patterns of our conscious mind, but the deep, hidden structures of our unconscious mind that determine who we are as individuals. So basically, Freud said that our conscious mind cannot be the center because even our conscious mind is a product of our unconscious mind. So for the structuralists, meaning and truth doesn't come from above or within. Rather, they believe the real source of all meaning and truth are these deep structures. As I mentioned earlier, they believe that the source of everything is from some sort of material system or underlying structure. So let's take a look at the structure of language, which the structuralists will say is a self-contained system. Now, to the structuralists, the only thing giving words meaning are the structure of words that surround the word and the relationship and the differences that exist. So thus, words do not have any inherent meaning. They can only act on this principle of differentiation. Now, what do I mean by this? Think about the game Guess Who. In this game, you find out who it is by determining who it's not. So by looking at, the structural qualities about it, by making wrong guesses. To the structuralist, this is how language works. Just take a look at these descriptive words. This is the external structure in which you can understand another word. Can you guess which word these terms are referring to? It's the word tree. Okay, so to the structuralist, the term tree doesn't refer to this object because of some innate quality of the word, but because mostly it doesn't refer to other things, grass or bush or lake. So you see, structures are not founded on things or individual elements that have meaning in and of themselves, but instead they're founded on relations between things. So structural meaning kind of rises out of the differences between all these different parts. Now, these individual elements of a structure, they have no internal meaning. It's only when you arrange those things in some type of system that you have, then you can even begin to determine any type of meaning. And so the word structure is merely created by this kind of common understanding of the people. It's not fixed, okay? It's not tethered to some type of higher reality. It's merely created, it's merely a human invention. I guess at this point I should introduce you to one of the ringleaders of structuralism. His name is Ferdinand de Saussure. And the reason I introduced you to him is because really structuralism originates in his linguistic studies. And Saussure is going to argue that language and words are completely arbitrary. Now, for most of us, when we speak, we kind of carry this notion that our words mean something and that they're not arbitrary and that they're somehow linked to this kind of idea with a capital I. But Saussure didn't see it this way. For Saussure, a word, or what he calls a sign, does not unite with this pre-existent thing with some kind of perfect name. Rather, a word or sign links a concept, which is called a signified, with a sound or symbol, which is called a signifier. So to the structuralist, when I say the word tree, all I'm doing is looking at a concept of a tree and coming up with some kind of sound. So words are just letters and sounds we slap on to explain some kind of concept. But really, to the structuralist, there's no real link between what's coming out of your mouth and the actual concept. Saussure even says that the relationship between the signified and the signifier is arbitrary. And what he offers as proof is that, if it weren't arbitrary, then there'd only be one language in the world. What makes the English word for tree any closer to the meaning than the French or the Spanish or Chinese word? He says that our words are arbitrary. They don't have meaning or capture truth. They're simply arbitrary. So you can see how in some ways structuralism is kind of like this annoying brother in the back seat of a car who is kind of trying to poke holes at everything you say. And by picking it apart, kind of tends to undermine your whole notion of reality and our understanding of truth. They assert that everything that we've come to know as capital T truth can be basically traced back and explained away in some kind of material origins. And they do this by pointing to the underlying structures. So to them, the underlying structures can explain everything. And so there is no mystery, no kind of metaphysical essence. It's just a systematic and deterministic string of ones and zeros. So here's a quick overview of the qualities of a structure. And for the structuralist, this is what undergirds every subject of understanding. To them, a structure is unconscious, materialistic, deterministic. Again, we're not the makers of our own destiny. We are not we're just simply determined by these structures. Secondly, structures are not founded on things, but the relations between the things. I mentioned this when talking about language, but let me give you another example. Think about a CD. As many of you know, CDs, it kind of works on this binary code. So every bit of information is encoded as either a 1 or a 0. Now the ones and zeros, they have no meaning in and of themselves, but when you take them together as a system of differences, so 1 is not a 0 and 0 is not a 1, and then you string them out, they produce a complex symphony. So again, 1 and 0 is nothing, only the structure of differences that create the sound. And so that's what the structuralists are arguing here. Now, another example, think about your DNA. My DNA is a kind of structure, and it's formed when the 4 elements, abbreviated, so C, A, T, G, and now the individual C, A, T, G, they have no meaning in and of themselves, but when you string them together, C, A, T, G, in a system of differences, you actually have a living, breathing, conscious human being. All right, so you get what I'm saying as far as the structures are not founded on things, inherent things, but on the relationship between those things. Okay, so third, structures are complete, logical, and all-encompassing. They also will say that they're not static, but dynamic, and they're constantly transforming themselves to form new elements, and they change over time. And lastly, structures are found in all areas of thought and study. So basically, any discipline can be interrogated at its structure. So how does this affect you? Well, for one, it explains why the sciences are kind of taking over most disciplines. In fact, some people have said that humanity is being drained away from the humanities. And you certainly see this in contemporary art. In fact, a lot of contemporary artists take a little bit more of a cold, calculated approach to their art. And what once was a kind of a discipline of transcendence, it now has a little bit more of a scientific approach, and beauty becomes arbitrary and explainable. And so the influence of structuralism, it certainly cuts very deep in contemporary art. And because people can analyze the arts at its structure, music becomes reducible to its structure, and it can be almost treated like an equation. Many of you have taken personality tests. All right, so think about that. These tests are designed to analyze the structures underlying your actions and to try to help explain why you are the way you are. Now, I wanted to introduce you to somebody else. This is Claude Levi-Strauss. He is going to develop structuralism even further. Now, most people think horizontally, but Strauss says, hey, look at all these myths. What if we pay attention to the vertical rows? And when we do this, we notice the hidden structure that underlies the whole system, and then we can see all the differences. And so that's one of the things that Strauss kind of contributes to this whole discussion, is he starts really kind of analyzing structures and thinking about them in different ways, and not just horizontally, but vertically. And by doing so, able to kind of pull out other things that you can kind of notice from this kind of distance. Okay, so I've outlined the basic ideas of structuralism, but I now wanted to offer a little bit of a critique or raise some questions, considering whether or not this is an adequate way of kind of understanding things. And so first of all, let's just consider the ironies of structuralism. Irony number one, the structuralists insist that meaning is not a product of human desire. Yet their obsession to organize all thought and practice into a universal system betrays this, okay? So that's the first irony. The second irony, the structuralist rejection of all ontological and epistemological centers is then followed by their own structure as a new center, okay? And so you can see the ironies that kind of arise from this. I would also add that to them, words are arbitrary, yet they remain necessary tools in which they construct their arguments. So needless to say, there are some unresolved issues. I think if we're not careful, we will look to these kind of underlining structures and assume that we're just these kind of pre-programmed individuals operating in some kind of deterministic system. And this has huge implications for free will and autonomy and in how we find meaning. It's important to remember that while structural kind of scientific approaches can explain the how, it's not a field of study to explain the why. And it cannot give an account for human agency. John Lennox, a mathematician and emeritus professor at Oxford, addresses this notion in his book, Can Science Explain Everything? John Lennox uses this example in the book of boiling water, and he asks us to consider the question, why is it boiling? Now, one explanation would be to say, well, it's boiling because heat is being conducted through the base of the kettle and agitating the molecules of the water, and that's why the water is boiling. So there you go. That explains it. That's a structural kind of scientific explanation. But Lennox says there's another kind of explanation, and that is the water's boiling because I'd like a cup of tea. Now you can see how both of those explanations are valid. They don't conflict, they don't compete, but they're complementary. And one could say they're both necessary. One is scientific, more of a scientific kind of explanation, and the other is an agent explanation. And just because you can break apart and analyze something's underlying structure does not mean that you have a full explanation. And this is where I think structuralism falls short. And really, its ironies only kind of point to this further. Okay, so just as a recap, we just looked at this concept called structuralism. We talked about how it attempted to kind of overturn major historical concepts like ontology and epistemology, thinking about Marx and Freud. We also talked about how linguists like Saussure and Levi-Strauss, how they used the structure of language and then dismantled it, ultimately declaring that words are arbitrary. So for the structuralists, the meaning of words is completely dependent on what they believe to be this man-made structure, and therefore not tethered to some type of absolute truth or essence. And so to them, everything can be explained by analyzing the material structures, which are ultimately arbitrary because they're man-made. And so next time we will see how these ideas that were established with structuralism will eventually bleed into what we will call post-structuralism. So something to look forward to. Thank you for your attention, and we'll catch you next time.